All right, everyone. A little something different today. Um, Looking at the new Warhammer of the Old World and thinking about it from sort of a competitive standpoint, um, I got very interested in the new Nova tournament that's coming out here. So this is a pretty big tournament that's happening, and I was very interested in sort of looking at their tournament pack. Looking at this tournament pack, looking at it as perhaps maybe a harbinger of things to come, thinking about it, what are they going for, what they're not, sort of give our opinions about it. I think it's important to sort of look at this as an opportunity for the community to sort of address some of the concerns that the community feels about Warhammer: The Old World and sort of talk about them. So I'm going to read through it and sort of give my initial thoughts about what's going on here. So first of all, the event he goes into, the organizer goes into that. Um, I want to read this blurb because I think it's this sort of summarizes that I think a lot of what's sort of going on in the community. It says there's been a lot of talk about list comp and restrictions. So the person thanks them for all their comments and suggestions. So one thing that sort of jumps out to me is that there has been in the community a lot of discussions about, many people don't feel that the old world, is quote competitively balanced or balanced. And so it is interesting that in this first tournament, the organizer has been listening to a lot of these comments and suggestions from the community, which I think it's great. I want to say generally when I look at this sort of tournament pack, I don't see everything I want. I think some things I agree with, some things I don't, but I do really appreciate the effort that sort of went into this tournament pack. And so I would prefer to keep this video more about some suggestions about how to improve it. Do I think this is a good tournament pack? It's a good tournament pack for the first GT ever. It's a good first stab, but a lot of what I would suggest here, I would like to think of them more as critiques for future tournament packs. So let's just sort of keep that in mind that I think in general, I think that we are having tournament packs that are a little that are sort of being a little more proactive, I think are great. So first thing again, I think that we have to say, thank you for listening to the community. So, maybe there's going to be a tweet going forward, but he's even saying this person, I assume it's he, but I apologize. This person says, this is starting here. So views it as a starting point. So this person feels, this person writes, I feel my job as a TO is to provide as enjoyable event experience to as many games as possible. So sort of going into this, he does feel the thought process enjoyment seems to be first. The goal is to ensure that people return next year and spread the word. Um, that goes into, lead up, mission objectives, quizzes, personality, and yes, even list building. So he kind of uh, brings up this idea that list building is on the radar. Um, there feels to be a consensus here that for this tournament, they want some more restrictions. And what I sort of pick up from that is to not sort of scare people away from the game. To not this first major tournament going in here and just people who bring in a lot of really hard lists, a lot of sort of very spammy lists, and not to let it sort of digress into that. So let's get into some of these restrictions. I think these restrictions, the first thing that I sort of note into these army restrictions here is that they're pretty comprehensive. Um, but let's get into them. So the first thing, 2,500 points. I think that's great. I think that is where the tournament meta is going to lead into. I think that 2,000 points is too small. I think that a lot of the perceived imbalances in the game can be addressed with larger points. So for myself, I've played Warhammer Fantasy for years, and then when the original Warhammer Fantasy world blew up, I went to Kings of War, which was a pretty competitive Game, we started out relatively small in points around 2000 and eventually got up to 2300, 2500. And we found that generally in the Kings of War community that the larger points generally can solve some of these balance issues. So first of all, I love, and I think that 2500 points should be the standard for tournaments. I think that when you have more points, it just helps balance some of these very powerful individual pieces. So that's great. The first thing, the next thing that I love, legacy armies and archangels are allowed, just sort of thumbing their nose at GW and saying, no, legacy armies will be a part of this game, GW or not. The third one is the rule of three for characters, core, and special. I think this one is something I'm a little worried about. If there's one rule I think that I have probably the most issue with, it is this one. More specifically about core. I really I understand the idea that they don't they don't want this to be spammy lists, but I think that core I don't see a reason to sort of cap core slots at three. Special, maybe I'm on the fence about special. I would actually not want to cap special either. Characters, I think that you can do some spammy things with characters. That's fine. But core and special, but especially core, certain armies are going to need to play more MSU. That's how their competitive advantage is going to be. And I do worry that this is a little too much, and certain armies are going to suffer just based on how they're designed. And I'm of the opinion that restriction shouldn't sort of favor one army over another. And I think in this game, certain armies, like elite armies, or perhaps armies that don't rely so much on blobs, this is going to really hurt them, especially in core. So I do feel this rule of three for core and special is a little too restrictive. I think keeping it at characters is fine. Max two of the same rare choice is fine. I'm okay with that. I think it could be loosened up a little to three, but at the same time, I can get on board with that. Max two characters in a unit is fine as long as we're not including champions. I think that's fine. Max one level three to level four. I think the community has felt a lot of concern about sort of wizarding spam. So I think this is generally a good one. I think the best one is the max 35% on characters. I don't know if 35% is exactly where it should be. I haven't looked at every army list to see if some armies are benefited by just meeting that 875 cutoff. Not sure, but I do like the limits at 30 to 40, maybe 30 to 40% on characters. When you increase the points to 2,500 and then you sort of limit those characters down further, you really are making, I think the characters are powerful in this game, but you are really allowing the opponents of some of these powerful characters just to have more models and ways of dealing with it. And there's just less of them on the field. The next one, so I like that one. The next one is max 10 models for closed and open order formations. I think there is a worry about line hammer. I don't agree with this one. I think that maybe 15 models would be a little better. Again, I think that 10 is too restrictive. I can understand there are some concerns that they don't want 30-man lines across the field, but 10 is too small. I think that, like I said, I can understand that they don't want some sort of weird line hammer thing happening, but I think that if you're going to have some sort of set restriction, it should be about 15 models. Again, I don't think, there could be some very good reasons to bring or 10 or 13 man line that could really matter. So I think 15 would be where I would be more comfortable about, stopping some of the egregious 30-man lines is fun. No allies is fine. Characters on chariots or monster mounts may take a slot of the 0 to 3, which is a good one. That's fine. I think that especially for chariots in certain armies, it's not going to be, a lot of chariot spam. Detachments, this is fine. The use of 0 to 3 slots. Yeah, that's basically stopping the rule of three. I mean, if you're going to limit to three as well, you need to at least put detachments in that as well. So while I don't agree with the rule of three, I think that if you're going to, don't allow people to use detachments to sort of skirt that rule. All right, this is another thing that I love. Proxies are welcome. So this is again sort of a pretty big deal. This is a huge tournament that's basically saying non-GW models are fine. Hey, make them what you see is what you get. That's reasonable. No plastic toys. Yeah, that's fine. Most people are going to, and I think that's terrific. I think there's been a lot of debate about what does this mean for the future of the game, that if people aren't buying GW models, are they going to support the old world? I don't have those questions. I don't have the answers to them. But what I do think is that this is the right call. Um, People need to be allowed to bring their non-GW models. So I applaud them for that. All right. So the next thing that we could talk about is just the game. The one thing that I would just notate here is 3 hour time limits. I think that 3 hours is fine. I think that you really can't go over 3 hours. I'm just more interested to see if I think in a tournament game you are going to have people needing to reposition their models, reform ranks like that. That is a thing in old world. This is a game where your model, if you want to play competitively, you can't keep your models in the same formation the entire game. There's going to be times that you can need to, go into, maybe a line formation, even if it's 10 wide. Do you keep in ranks or do you, form a marching column? What I think is going to be interesting is 3 hours, is it going to be enough for these games? I'd love to sort of get some analytics to see how many games are closing order. I don't think that you should increase the thing. This is just something for my own thought process, which is that can this game be played in 3 hours and finish those games and people are not rushed? I think it's going to come down to rebasing your armies in ways that you can efficiently reform. I think that's going to be something that if I was going to this tournament, I would definitely be thinking of sort of efficient ways of basing your model so that you could take advantages of the reforms without sort of eating into that time. So, yeah, interesting thought. That's just something food for thought as well. Let's get into the scoring system. Okay, so the scoring system is based off. I think the 20-0 system is fine. I think that there's people who have different, but this has been the standard. Um, Going back to fantasy for where I played it at least in Kings of War, and I think the 20-0 system is generally okay. They then give +3 victory points. We'll get into this as well in the victory point difference. I'll talk into this especially with the scenarios, but overall, the 20-0 system with some bonus points is fine. I think that's good. Let's get into the score cap. So this is the amount that you can basically just win. So you can win battle points is about 115, so 20 per game. So this is saying that you're going to get around 20-ish per game with 3 objectives here. So again, around 115 is your max. And then you've got, so I think this is fine to sort of lean a little more heavily into battle is fine for me. Still 25 points for paint max I think is good. It's not, like I said, it's enough that if you want to really win the overall, you are going to need to have a well-painted army, but a lot of it is battle. So I like that. Sportsmanship 10, I think, is a little small, and we'll get into that. I'll get into the sportsmanship rubric, but I do think that um 10 points is too small. And I think it's being eaten up by cosplay. So I don't know how I feel. I would generally more disagree with actually making cosplay part of the overall points. I don't think that we should be sort of forcing people to dress weird. I don't know. Generally don't like it. I think that if you're going to do cosplay, and they've already done this, by the way, they just hey, just put it into your as part of your theme. They already have this where it's like, if you want to win this best theme, put it cosplay and army and story, right? This is fine. In other words, they have a specific award for cosplay. I would rather them not have cosplay as part of the main score and just sort of bump up sportsmanship to I would think 25. That would be fine. Anyway, I overall I like the score cap. I would prefer if cosplay was not part of it and just sportsmanship would sort of reach that 25 points. All right. Terrain. This is good. This is just generally talking about them setting up, being very clear about what terrain represents. Interesting that this is sort of an all or nothing. So there is no there doesn't seem to be any sort of specified heights on things. So it looks like it's a combination of true line of sight with a few caveats here, which is like hills are just going to always block things. So maybe they have some tables with more flat terrain or smaller hills, but that's how I'm reading this, is that hills are a exception to the rule of true line of sight and that they're just block line of sight. So that's how I'm reading it. In other words, hills, the way I'm reading this is hills are going to sort of overcome the default rules of true line of sight. So maybe some clarification there, but no, that's generally fine. All right, let's get into the paint score rubric. I think for the most part, we'll just look into this. For the most part, the paint score rubric is fine. Um, a lot of this stuff is pretty straightforward. I don't have any problems with this. The only small maybe critique I would make about this is I don't think that they should actually make a display board. Like I'm all about, hey, and I do love all their explanations about how you're getting the points. I think it's great that they are laying out they're giving people specifics about what they are expecting in their paints. The one thing that I would say, and it's a minor part of the score, but I still think it shouldn't be part of it, is a display board there. I think that display boards are great to have as if you want to make them as part of your theme, it's great. I don't think that you should be putting a display board as sort of hard points into the paint scheme because it's going to favor certain people who are local, who display boards, especially if you need a good one, are just not going to be able to be brought. So that's the reason that I don't think that you should be giving slight advantages to people who really can't bring a good display board. And the people who bring the best display boards are the people who are locals, right? So just the thing that, especially when you're requiring these display boards to have lighting effects and special things. Yeah, I think that's just it's a small point, but again, that's in Kings of War we generally display boards were nice to have, but they were never counted in the actual points. All right, let's get into. But overall, the paint score is rubric is fine. All right, let's get into the sportsmanship rubric. So I like this. So there's a few things. So first of all, I would say this. I like the 1 through 5. I like the more granular approach to the sportsmanship book. I think that obviously 1 to 5. Some sportsmanships can be a little too simple, yes or no. So I do like this when we can be a little more granular. I would hope, and hopefully this is not being taken seriously. I do maybe a slight tweak I would say is that I don't think that a 5 that you have to be cheering and high fives and etc. to make a 5. I think this is sort of getting down to personality. I know I've played a lot of tournaments, and I would say that I've had some great opponents who I think were extremely sportsmanlike, who weren't cheering, weren't giving. I mean, we shook hands before and afterwards, but we said good game. But I don't think that it's necessary to sort of have people getting into cheering and high fives to make it a 5. I worry. I mean, I'm hoping that no one takes it a little too seriously, but hopefully this doesn't sort of force people to sort of get into a little bit of fakery where it's like, oh, I have to high five this person. I know for myself and for a lot of players, throughout the game as I'm playing, I'm sort of just focused on my watching my opponent and playing it very quiet. So I think that you can have that and still be good. I don't hear arguing and judges being called multiple times as a 1. I go back and forth with that. Um, I think that there are times, especially in this first tournament, that you may need to call a judge, and I think a person can do that in a polite way and still have a great game. So yeah, but overall, I do like the granular approach to sportsmanship. I just think that it should be a higher percent as general. All right. Prizes are generally fine. I think that, I know I may be nitpicky about paint and sportsmanship, but one of the things that I would say is that this highest overall is going to be the most coveted prize. And so at the top of the people who are truly competing, these smaller things like sportsmanship and cosplay and even some display boards, that could actually mean the difference between really winning the event or not. At the top, a lot of times these tournaments, the percent difference is so small that I wouldn't want a person who feels that they didn't dress up in cosplay to not win the event, or that they didn't, I don't know, high five enough people. So it's just something to keep in mind that you do have to understand that people are coming to have fun, but like I said, I just think these little things could be tweaked and made better. All right. But overall, I like this in general. I think that with a little improvement, I think that this could be just really great. All right. So let's get into the scenarios. I think man, it's tough to sort of it's tough to sort of talk about the scenarios because you'd really have to start talking about the old world game in general. And one of the things that is just a problem with the old world is that the old world is essentially a kill game. It is there's not really any that's sort of the problem that when we start talking about these scenarios is that at its core, the old world, with the victory point system of the old world basically being killing things, killing your general and standards, that that's sort of what the old world is as a game. It is a kill game. And the big problems with so that's the first issue is that the tournament organizers are obviously trying to build these scenarios on top of effectively just a kill game. And what I found in my tournament experience is that pure kill games aren't a good way to test skills, and they're not very fun. It sort of lends itself to people bringing super elite armies that are very tough to kill. It also can lend itself to people just sort of playing passive and just shooting things. And I would always say that, and hopefully this can improve in the future with Old World and with the tournament community, that we as a tournament scene would move away from effectively kill scenarios into being the majority of the points of winning a game comes into objectives, right? That you can have your entire army die, but if you fulfill the objectives, then you can actually get, a 15-5, And Kings of War is done. This is where Kings of War, I think, they could learn a little from Kings of War about being Kings of War is effectively an objective based game where kill points are sort of a bit of a minor point ancillary to the game, and it's a lot about just fulfilling objectives. And so for this is saying that sort of putting this in perspective that obviously that is what the old world is, but I would hope in the future I would love to see the old world tournament scene move to more objective base where it's not really about how much you kill stuff, but it's more about fulfilling an objective, getting on a table side, maybe killing a specific person. So with that in mind, this is why I'm saying this, that I feel a lot of the scenarios are sort of a little flat in that they're like, for instance, the game one, break the spirits. Oh, kill 75% of your unit strength. And that's how you're going to win. I mean, so really, to win this tournament, all you really need to do is just kill your opponent. And that's even the scenario points, they're a small part of the 20-0. They're just three extra. And you really don't even have to think about them. If you generally kill your opponent, you're going to get your points and get the scenario. And that's something where I think that's what I'm sort of saying. The scenario could be fleshed out more with developing objectives, making those objectives it, and then because I think that's how you can really test people tactically, right? When it's about then people are much more willing to sacrifice. Then also shooting based armies are a little more of a disadvantage because some of these scenarios may involve having to really move the army forward. So a few things to keep in mind. So, and that's what I would say about all the games. It's generally kill, and generally the objectives are sort of, especially even from percent points, are sort of pointless. There is one that I do have a little bit of a problem with, and that's this payment in blood, where they're specifically saying if you kill a monster or a spellcaster, you get bonus objectives. Killing the general is fine. Everyone has to have a general. I I think this is going to favor certain armies over another one, especially in this point. If your opponent's army has no casters or models, you automatically receive the objective. So, what I would say is I generally have found that these sort of scenarios in which you pick certain sort of models are just going to inherently favor some armies over another. Um, I don't this is the sort of scenario that I think should be avoided in the future, is sort of picking out specific types of models and automatically giving your opponent points if they don't have casters or monsters. It's just it's an inherent little problem with it. Um, some of these scenarios are better. I think one of them is the table quarter ones, the crush. So some of these are a little better where it's effectively table quarters. So I think this is probably the best scenario, right? Where it's more about table quarters and taking certain table quarters, getting some bonuses. This is probably your best one. Like I said, that the scenarios are one of those things that it is difficult to build good scenarios on the old world game system, that the general victory point system that it's built on is just kill stuff. And hopefully that can be improved in time. Hopefully the community can see the problems with bringing just pure kill based armies and start to move it towards objectives here. All right, so that's my opinion on this tournament pack. I'm going to be playing some games with this as well and test it. Overall, I like it. Overall, I like the spirit. I do think it's at some points a little too restrictive, but I also think this is a first good shot, a good stab at this, and I think it can be improved upon. So thanks, guys, for watching.